Everybody is familiar with We Are the World, the star-studded charity song back in the 80s to help raise funds for hunger in Africa, but it feels like nobody ever talks about what went on to become VH1's #1 most metal moment, Hearing Aid and the song Stars, which is essentially the heavy metal version of We Are the World, organized back in 1985 by Ronnie James Dio and his fellow bandmates, Vivian, Campbell, and Jimmy Bain. This is the story of metal's most charitable moment. Back in 1984, the BBC, and mainly reporter Michael Burke, had done extensive reporting on the Ethiopian famine, prompting the Boomtown Rats singer Bob Geldof and his partner Paulie Yates to put together Band-Aid, which was a charitable supergroup that in its first incarnation featured Bono, Boy George, George Michael, Phil Collins, and about 1 million other people, all of whom were internationally based. Together, they would record the worldwide hit Do They Know It's Christmas, which ended up selling over 2 million copies and raising over $24 million, and of course resulted in the now legendary charity concert Live Aid. Upon seeing the success of Do They Know It's Christmas, US-based musician and activist Harry Belafonte wanted to put something similar to Band-Aid together featuring American musicians, and with the help of Ken Cragen, they put together USA for Africa, which was another charitable supergroup that featured Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie, who also wrote USA for Africa's lead single, We Are the World. While USA for Africa included a ton of top musicians aside from Jackson and Richie, including Stevie Wonder, Paul Simon, Tina Turner, Bob Dylan, etc., etc., etc. Hard rock and metal was also a dominant force at that time, but there was zero representation on We Are the World, save for a few, rock-leaning singers, mainly Steve Perry, but that's it. Enter Ronnie James Dio and his band, which at that time featured Vivian Campbell on guitar, bassist Jimmy Bain, Vinny Appice on drums, and keyboardist Claude Snell, who were in the studio at the time working on the third Dio record, Sacred Heart. According to Campbell, though, this was a rather rough time period for the band, as Ronnie James Dio and his wife Wendy had temporarily separated, leaving Ronnie's mood to be, quote, really, really dark. Tensions were also present within the studio, though, with everybody basically bailing as soon as they had finished recording their parts, leaving only Ronnie and engineer Angelo Arcuri in the studio, which was a total 180 from the camaraderie and sort of gang mentality on the first two records, Holy Diver and The Last in Line. It was also during this time that Do They Know It's Christmas and We Are the World were massively popular singles, and it was a radio event that sparked the idea for Vivian Campbell and Jimmy Bain to create heavy metal's version of a charitable supergroup, which ended up becoming Hearing Aid. According to Campbell in an interview with Guitar Interactive, so at that time, that We Are the World thing had come out with Michael Jackson and all the pop stars that made this great record. And Jimmy and I, who were roommates at the time, we were living in an apartment together. We happened to do an interview, which I believe was a Radiothon charity event for World Hunger, for a station called KLOS in Los Angeles, and the DJ asked us, how come nobody from the hard rock world was invited to participate in that? And we thought, you're absolutely right. And this was an era when hard rock was really sort of shunned. I mean, it never got nominated for a Grammy or anything. There was no real industry recognition, even though it was a very, very popular cultural force and sold in multi-millions. But the industry was yet to really fully recognize it as being legit. And so anyway, we were joking about this, and it was Jimmy who, he was a funny guy, and Jimmy right off the bat said, yeah, we should do one. We should call it Hearing Aid. We were all like, ha ha ha. We fell off our stools. And then we went back to our apartment, and Jimmy said, well, do you want to actually do this? And I said, really? I mean, do we have time for this? And he said, yeah. So Jimmy and I wrote the song. We didn't write the lyrics. We put the music together. We thought, we're not going to get this off the ground without Ronnie. We need some clout. We need the name. So we went in the studio the next day. As I said, we're in the middle of doing the Sacred Heart album. Ronnie's in a real dark spot. We offer it and we say, Ronnie, what about this? He immediately shuts it down. No interest. So we keep pushing it on him for a couple of weeks, and then eventually he came back to us and said, you know what? Yeah, I'll get on board with this. so he wrote the lyric for it. Regarding his initial lack of interest in the project, Dio had this to say back in a 1986 interview.
I said, no, I don't want to do it. I have something else to do. And I eventually had to, because they did need someone stronger at the helm. So I said, all right, I'll do it. Moan, 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 as we all do. Then discovered that I was a real idiot for not wanting to take part of it, with it in the first place, and did. And then became completely caught up in all of it, which I am now.
With Dio now officially on board, it became time to recruit all of the other musicians for the project, with the task being spearheaded by Campbell, along with a publicist that he was working with at the time, and going through her Rolodex and cold calling fellow musicians, some that he knew, some that he didn't, to get them to take part in this project, as well as setting up all of the travel and accommodation for everybody. The end result became the song Stars, which features a roster of roughly 50 musicians, though a majority of them are just background vocals, including Spinal Tap's David St. Hubbins, aka Michael McKean, and Derek Smalls, aka Harry Shearer, which is just fantastic that they were able to get Spinal Tap for this, as well as 8 different lead singers on the track, including, of course, Dio, Dave Meniketti of Y&T, Judas Priest, Rob Halford, Quiet Riot's Kevin DuBrow, rest in peace, Eric Bloom of Blue Öyster Cult, Paul Shortino of Rough Cutt, Jeff Tate from Queensrÿche, and Don Dokken. Dokken has previously recalled his experience being a part of Hearing Aid, saying, quote, "We recorded Stars in May 1985 in A&M studio in Los Angeles with the backing tracks for the song taped at Sound City. I knew that Rob Halford and Jeff Tate and all the metal guys would be turning up in their black leather jackets, so I wore a white suit to the session to stand out. There's a documentary charting the making of the record, and at one point you can hear Ronnie Dio jokingly say to me, 'Hey Don, GQ magazine called for you,' which kind of reflected the relaxed, good-natured spirit of the day. Ronnie was producing the record, and he sent me the song a couple of days before the session and indicated which lyrics I'd be singing. There was no debate over who'd sing what. I remember saying, 'Ronnie, I have a problem with this song because every time I sing this melody, I sound just like you.' I was joking, but it's very obviously a Ronnie Dio melody, and I had to figure out how to deliver my lines differently because everyone else was sounding like I want to be Ronnie. I can honestly say, though, that there was no ego clashes on the day, zero, and no one making diva demands from anyone at the studio. That came as a pleasant surprise, and I think it was a testament to the respect everyone had for Ronnie. I've been asked to do a number of charity records since, and sometimes people are pretty vague about exactly where the money is going. In some instances, it never leaves their own bank account. You have to be careful because it's like, don't take advantage of me and use my name to pay for your fucking wife's boob job. But it was cool to take part in the Hearing Aid record. I remember some people acting all shocked that guys in hard rock and heavy metal bands actually cared about anyone but ourselves, like we were all monsters with nothing but drugs, girls, and money on our minds. That says more about those people than it does about us. It's one moment in hard rock history that we can all be proud of. The track also featured a number of phenomenal guitarists, including, of course, Campbell, as well as Neil Schon, George Lynch, Carlos Cavazo, and Dave Murray and Adrian Smith from Iron Maiden, among a few others. Though it was recorded May 20th and 21st, 1985, the record wouldn't actually release until a full year later, May 26, 1986, due to a number of holdups from record labels, from all the different musicians. But when it was finally released, it featured the single Stars, of course, alongside some live tracks from Kiss, Rush, Accept, etc., and a couple studio tracks from Y&T, and somewhat surprisingly, Jimi Hendrix with the song Can You See Me, which is just insane that they were able to pull that off with the Hendrix estate. Upon the record finally releasing, it was able to raise $1 million in its first year before eventually surpassing the $3 million mark as time went on. Initially, the funds were meant to help with African and world hunger as a whole, but due to government corruption with the funds raised from Band-Aid the year prior, a lot of that money from Band-Aid did not go to where it was supposed to. The money from Hearing Aid Stars was actually used to buy and send agricultural machinery. A couple of the musicians involved have commented on this previously, with Rough Cut vocalist Paul Shortino saying, "Unfortunately, all that stuff that everybody didn't do a damn bit of good for the people in Africa. Most of the food sat on the docks rotting because of their government." Ted Nugent, who is also involved in the project, although only as a background vocalist, noted, "I've been going to Africa on hunting expeditions since 1978, and I guarantee that everybody at Hearing Aid combined didn't feed as many Africans as I've done. I've shot dozens of big game animals with my bow and arrow, and all of the meat goes to the villagers. I estimate I've brought over $1 million with the hunters I've booked into Africa, and all that money finds its way into conservation programs and directly into the villages where we hunt." Eventually, Vivian Campbell concluded by saying, "The bottom line was the money we raised. We did it for the right reasons, but it also proved that even in the decadent 80s, there was a positive side to rock and roll people. Well, as long as there was free cocaine, some people could be goaded into anything." Originally released only on vinyl and cassette, in recent years, Wendy Dio has said numerous times that she has intentions of reissuing the project on modern platforms, along with some extra content to freshen it up, with the proceeds, of course, going to the Ronnie James Dio Stand Up and Shout Cancer Fund. She's also mentioned the possibility of having some newer, younger bands take part in recording something for the reissue, but we'll see what happens. I don't really know if that would have the same effect today with bands of that style as it did back then. The musical tides have most certainly shifted in a tremendous way. It's a totally different landscape out there. That type of stuff, obviously that's what this whole channel is based off of, but that type of stuff is just not as mainstream as it once was, unfortunately. So I'd be curious to see who she might get to take part in this. Nonetheless, though, a reissue would be cool and hopefully get people talking about it again, renew some interest. I just don't ever hear Hearing Aid come up in conversation. I'm a younger guy myself. I'm still in my 20s, even though I don't look like it. But I actually just discovered Hearing Aid a few years ago when I stumbled across the vinyl at a record store. So I don't know. I think it'd be pretty sweet to see it reissued, especially with some additional stuff. Maybe put it on DVD with the documentary that they made and some additional video content, all that kind of stuff. So who knows, but it sounds like it could be coming sooner rather than later. All right, though, I gotta run. My fiance is waiting for me to shoot my stars into her, so I gotta go. But thanks so much for watching. Feel free to subscribe if you want to see more, and I will see you next time.